Welcome to the Hunger for Change podcast, a space where we discuss all of the relevant innovations of health, debunk myths, and highlight the groundbreaking work of today's health pioneers. I'm your host, Niklas Gustafson, and I'm excited to introduce today's guest, Joshua Kreifels, a master's level registered dietitian with a unique approach to tackling hypothyroidism and Hashimoto's through functional medicine. Joshua has dedicated his career to identifying the underlying causes of these conditions, guiding clients on their journeys to optimal health. By integrating nutrition, fitness, sleep, and effective stress management, he empowers individuals to thrive. Today we'll talk to Joshua about his approach to wellness, exploring how he helps people break free from the cycle of symptoms and find solutions that truly work for them. So let's get started and welcome Joshua to the show. Thank you so much, Joshua, for joining me. It's a pleasure having you.
Thank you so much. I'm excited.
What does health mean to you?
Health to me is, we have a body, we have a mind, we have a spirit. And so taking control of those, being a good steward of those. So health isn't just physical health. It's not just mental health. It's not just spiritual health. It's encompassing all of those things and really continuing day to day to make sure that we are using nutrition, using movement, using stress management, ultimately to make it so that we are thriving, not just surviving, kind of going day to day, but ultimately, how are we prolonging the aging process? The better that our health is now, the slower that we'll be aging versus the opposite. The worse our health is now, the more accelerated our aging will be. So it's just this full encompassing aspect of us as humans and how we operate on this earth and what the quality of life looks like through the habits that we have.
Could you share a bit about your journey? How did you discover your passion for nutrition and health?
I was an athlete my entire life. I started playing sports at the age of 5 and just all the way up through middle school and high school. I played 1 year of college baseball. And then when I stopped playing sports, I realized that I still loved physical activity. I loved being in the gym. I loved progressing in strength and fitness. And so I was looking what avenues are going to ultimately land me in that position. And I had kind of bounced around in college for different degrees that I wanted to pursue, ultimately landed on biology, and then went on to pursue a master's degree in nutrition, ultimately to complete my internship to become a registered dietitian, which is what I am now. And so I found that food is such a critical component, not only to our health, but also as a social component. Like we go out to eat, we socialize, we go to events, we travel, we go to, there's different cuisines all around the world. I just became fascinated in the food, what that means, and then how that ultimately influences our health, our body composition, our energy. And so I think just by nature, I love food. And I would say that I'm a bit of a foodie. And so if I can bridge being a foodie, loving food, and that being something that can actually influence my health, sign me up. I'm all in.
Have you always been a foodie? Have you always loved food?
Ironically, no. I grew up on the standard American diet, fast food often, TV dinners, frozen food, a lot of sugar, a lot of processed foods. I would say probably 75% of my diet was processed foods growing up. And I had a lot of acne as a kid in high school. And so once I actually started to prepare my own food and eating really healthy whole foods, not only did I see my skin improve, which is a big deal for honestly a teenage boy, but also saw my performance improve. I started increasing my abilities in sports, improving body composition, building strength, building muscle. So I thought, oh, wow, okay. When I was eating the standard American diet, all these processed foods, I had all this brain fog, I was sluggish, I had acne, poor digestion. And when I switched to actually really good quality, healthy whole foods, a lot of those things went away or resolved or in some capacity. So no, I was not always a foodie. It really developed once I started to dive into what food actually is and where food comes from and sourcing and all that stuff.
The skin issues, have you faced any other health challenges that changed the way in which you approach nutrition and health?
Not specifically in the sense of cause and effect. This is kind of a tangent, but I was bit by a tick in 2020, which led me down a whole rabbit hole of understanding Lyme disease and understanding co-infections of Lyme. And that really cascaded me down. Okay, I really need to be supporting detox and drainage pathways, supporting mitochondria health, because that is, in my opinion, the life of every cell. So while the skin issues was very dietary, I have had other stuff, like I said, that tick bite, and then just a variety of things that my wife has dealt with, gut infections, thyroid disease, eating disorders. So getting those experiences personally, but also relationally, and then now professionally, kind of helped me really understand that, wow, food really does make a big difference in our overall health. Even in the world of Lyme disease and these co-infections, like I'm not a Lyme specialist, but I understand the concept of chronic disease and understand the concept of these stealth infections and how mitochondrial health and your food and inflammation and all these things play such a key role.
People often discuss eating disorders like anorexia, but also orthorexia. That's another. Actually, I recently learned about this, and I listened to a podcast where you were talking about this. Could you explain what it is and like the signs of orthorexia?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the world of eating disorders or disordered eating, your relationship with food in one capacity or another is shifted off of normal. Well, what is normal? And we can kind of go into that. Ellen Satter has a really good definition of normal eating, but disordered eating could be restriction, it could be over-consuming, it could be purging in some capacity. But this concept of orthorexia, and I would say I have gone through a season of orthorexia myself, it's the principle of not touching food or being fearful of food that is not clean. And so only eating organic food, not consuming fast food because, that's not organic. It's not grass-fed. It's not pasture-raised meat. And so you almost take healthy eating to the extreme in the sense that you have, instead of just eating healthy whole foods, you've narrowed it down to, I will only eat healthy whole foods and I will not deviate. I will never have sugar. I will never have alcohol. I will never have anything that doesn't fit within these parameters.
Yeah.
And my experience with that is, while yes, you start with good intentions, the progression of that can take you down a slippery slope. I found myself having way more anxiety, way more stress, way more depression, being in social situations, and I couldn't eat because I was like, it's not organic. It's not grass-fed beef. I'm not going to eat it. But in reality, like if you just prioritize healthy whole foods 90% of the time, and then when there's situations where you don't have control of your food, you still can make the healthiest choice that's available. You don't need to completely restrict or completely omit, but you also don't need to completely just...
Doesn't have to be 100%. Doesn't have to be perfect.
Exactly. So
how did you manage to get out of there? I mean, and not trying to be perfect all the time.
One of my friends who was following more of a flexible dieting lifestyle, I had spent some time with him, and there was 2 specific trips. The first trip, I was still very much in that orthorexia mindset of like, I'm not going to eat sugar, I'm not going to eat processed food, I'm not going to eat this, that, or the other. And I remember going on a trip with him, and because he was incorporating more of a flexible dieting lifestyle, he was incorporating those things. And so I found myself very anxious, like, oh man, I'm not going to eat today because all we're eating is fast food or sugar and things like that. Fast forward to the second trip that I went with him, I remember telling myself, last time I was very anxious about this interaction. I'm going to go into this. I'm going to eat the food. I know that it's not my all the time food. I'm going to go into it. It's 3 or 4 days. And when I get back, I'm going to just get back on my normal routine. And it was such a 180 shift on my experience from trip 1 to trip 2, because I tangibly had told myself, you know what? This isn't my normal food. I don't honestly love sugar. I don't love fast food or whatever it ended up being, but this is what's going to be provided. And so rather than stress about the quality of the food or not getting the right foods, I'm just going to eat it and then go back to my normal rhythm afterwards.
You were mentioning eating out, like social situations where there can be like a pressure. I've always been gluten intolerant, and I remember when I was a kid going to birthday parties, for example, everybody having a birthday cake, and I couldn't eat it, and sometimes I felt like there was something wrong with me. I felt kind of guilty. Could you try to help our listeners to like not feel guilty and feel like that's normal? I mean,
I'm also, I can't have gluten. My wife and I can't have gluten.
Okay. It's very common.
It is very common, especially here in the United States.
It became more and more common, actually. When I was a child, it was, I think, 1 in 1,000. And now it's like 3%.
I think there's a variety of reasons why. I mean, by definition, gluten is just a protein. So our immune systems are having some sort of reaction towards a protein. Now, is that the root cause of that? In my opinion, no. I think that there's a lot of concern with the quality of the gut health and things like that. But to answer your question, in the sense of if you have some sort of food allergy or some sort of food intolerance, I think the initial component of that is really just understanding you and what you can and cannot eat. Like for us, for example, not being able to eat gluten, it's easy to be gluten-free in Seattle. it's not always the easiest to be gluten-free and travel to different places in the United States, especially like the South, like Southeastern United States, where there's just a lot of fried food and a lot of fast food and butters and things like that. But the other component to being in a city that is probably a little bit more affluent is there's a lot of gluten-free options. And so there's gluten-free breads, there's gluten-free pastas. So making that switch for us is like, I know I feel terrible when I eat gluten. I get really tired. My bowels change, which is not comfortable. And so for me, it's like, you know what? That's an easy sacrifice because I see a cause and effect. I see if I eat gluten, I don't feel well. Versus like, if I don't eat gluten, I feel better. Hard part is for kids who just don't really know and understand. Like, we're adults, we obviously can make that decision for ourselves. But for kids, it's a lot harder because they just want to be like every other kid. They don't necessarily understand, oh, why can't I have a cupcake when I'm at a birthday party? Why can't I have cookies or whatnot? And so that responsibility then falls on the parent to make sure that your child really understands, hey, it's not that we're trying to restrict you from all of these things. It's that your body just doesn't respond to it. And so in that instance, it could be helpful for the parent maybe to, if you send a child to a birthday party, to send them with a gluten-free treat. So they don't have to feel like they're sitting in a corner, not participating. They can still participate. They're just bringing their own snack or their own treat, whatever it ends up being.
That's a great idea. Could you elaborate on the process of educating people about the relationship between food as fuel and their energy and performance? I mean,
this has been a game changer for me. This is actually something that changed my taste buds. When I stopped eating for hunger and just filling a void and eating to eat, which I think is what's so easy to do as humans, like food is a necessity, we need to eat. When I shifted my mindset to, I'm going to eat to fuel my body, I'm going to eat to nourish my body, my taste buds changed significantly. Honestly, now I'm not motivated by sugar. I don't crave sugar. Like, if you give me a slice of cake or a steak, I'm going to choose a steak all day long. And that's for a variety of reasons. I just genuinely feel good eating really good quality animal-based proteins. And so this concept of food is fuel. Energy, according to law of thermodynamics, energy is not created nor destroyed. And so in order for us to get energy, we need to consume energy. So we're consuming calories, which is just a unit of energy. And so we're consuming proteins, we're consuming carbohydrates, we're consuming fats. Those are energy sources. We're taking those in, and then your body is, through metabolism, is generating energy, whether it's stored energy in the form of glycogen in your muscles or it's usable energy in blood sugar. And so for me, seeing how much, like, let's say example, carbohydrates for workouts increase my performance in the gym or increase my performance on the athletic field, whatever that looks like. Okay, that makes sense. But then you also need to focus on recovery, because it can't just be go, 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 go all the time. It's go when you need to, but it's also recover in the sense when you need to. So in my experience, I've worked with a lot of people in the weight loss space, in the thyroid space. And honestly, I would say most people that I've worked with are actually under-consuming food nourishment and either over-consuming calories or even under-consuming calories. So for example, I'll throw out just a random case study. Let's say a 45-year-old female comes to me, desire to lose weight, and we do a 7-day food log, and she's eating about 1,000 to 1,200 calories a day. I see this all the time. Well, in reality, you would think, 1,000 to 1,200 calories a day, this person should be losing weight. And I'm like, no, your body is in a constant state of fight or flight because it's so stressful for you to be eating so little calories.
Yes.
So what we need to do, we actually need to increase your calories, which is scary, especially for women. They're like, hey, my goal is weight loss. Why are you increasing my calories? I'm like, I hear you, but we actually need to get the food, which is energy, to be working for your metabolism, which is ultimately going to drive the needle forward, adjust your body composition, influence your hormones, affect your thyroid, which is the primary driver of metabolism. And so actually I have a case study I can think of. This lady, she was trying to lose weight, could not lose weight, was eating 1,000 calories a day. And over about 4 months, we actually doubled her calorie intake, north of 2,000 calories a day, had her on a strength training program, had her adequately sleeping, and her body composition significantly improved to the point where she had muscle definition, she had abs. We were doubling her calorie intake.
So how did you do that? I mean, what kind of food did you put in her basket?
I mean, she was eating at that time more of a ketogenic, very, very low carb diet.
Okay.
Her calories were very, very low. And so what we did from a performance perspective is just make sure she was getting adequate protein. And then I titrated up her carbohydrates, starting with increasing carbs around her workouts and then continuing to add. And it almost was like we were stoking a fire. with her metabolism because the more I fed her, actually, the better she responded.
That's amazing.
That doesn't happen in every scenario. That was obviously a single case study, but I have seen oftentimes women, especially when you are under eating, actually start eating adequately and eating real quality whole foods, especially increasing protein intake, that it does make a big difference.
You start thriving. Yeah. You mentioned you increased the carbs. What carbs did you give her?
I was primarily focusing on really easily digestible carbohydrates. And so potato, white rice, even some fruits. And if she was eating carbs and they made her feel sluggish, I said, okay, let's omit that one for now, and let's just continue to increase the portion size of the carbs that you feel good on. I know that I feel really, really good on white rice and potatoes, and I know my digestion feels really good on those things. That's obviously not the case for everybody, but your body does digest white rice really, really well compared to like a brown rice, which has all the extra fiber, which can take longer to digest, and there's lectins and whatnot. And so I was just giving her some simple carbs to increase, and that worked really, really well for her. But again, that isn't necessarily the case for everybody, but I have seen increasing overall calorie intake. Most importantly, protein. I think women or everybody in general are under consuming protein. So increasing protein alone, I have seen make a world of a difference.
What kind of protein? What are your favorite proteins?
I am a big advocate for animal-based proteins,
right?
Specifically beef, grass-fed beef.
Yeah.
I saw you did a podcast with Dr. Tina, and she is also very, very pro red meat, which is awesome. So I like red meat. I like wild game. I like wild caught fish, pasture-raised eggs. I don't honestly eat a ton of chicken. And the reason why is because it's so hard to find.
It is hard.
Pasture-raised chicken.
Yeah.
Even organically grown chickens are fed soy and corn.
Even in Europe, it's hard to find. Yeah.
So best case scenario, you would shop local and find a farmer that has chickens locally.
Or even have them in your own garden.
I mean, that would be best case scenario. Yeah, if you can. So grass-fed beef, wild-caught game, wild-caught fish, I think are probably the tops that I like.
Could you mention some of your food staples that you always have at home?
Every year, we buy at least half a cow. So we have a freezer full of meat.
Yeah.
I eat a lot of rice, white rice, just from a performance perspective in the gym. I also digest it really well. One of my bread and butter meals is ground beef, white rice, sauerkraut, and some butter and some salt. It is my favorite. I could eat it every single day. I just feel so good on it. But we have bananas, we have citrus fruits. Admittedly, my wife and I, although I'm a dietitian, I don't eat a lot of vegetables. I get a lot of my nourishment from meat. I get a lot of my nourishment from fruits. Yeah. And also vegetables just end up making me feel more bloated. And so I go based on how my body responds. I eat a lot of sauerkraut, so getting a lot of really good probiotics and glutamine from the cabbage there.
What about the sauerkraut? Do you make it yourself or do you buy it? Because if you buy it, at least in Europe, it's hard to buy sauerkraut that has not been pasteurized. And when it's pasteurized, it's like you don't get the good bacteria that you're looking for.
Sure. I typically buy it from the store. We do have quite a few Slavic friends whose parents make homemade sauerkraut, and it is delicious. But for me, ease and convenience, I just purchase it from the store and then just try to find the best quality, whether it's a local or even buying from a local farmer's market. Even without the beneficial bacteria, you're still getting good digestives. You're still getting rich glutamine content, which is essential for gut health. And I just like the sourness of the flavor.
Yeah, it's amazing. I love it.
Yeah, that is a good point about making your own.
So biohacking. I heard you talk about biohacking. What are your top favorite biohacks?
There's two that I think everybody should have in their house in some capacity. Number one is an infrared sauna. Number two is a cold plunge. Whether that's a trough, whether it's a cold shower. And the third one that I really like, and we actually just got some full panels, is red light therapy. And so you're obviously getting red light in the infrared sauna, but the additional component of heat, I've seen you talk about on your Instagram and the content you're producing, which is excellent, by the way. This concept of the sun and the sun really being a fuel source. I live in Seattle. We don't get a ton of sun. And so getting into a full spectrum infrared sauna or a full spectrum infrared light can be really helpful to not only juice up the mitochondria, but also from a mental health, from a metabolic health. I think that those modalities are excellent. there's a lot of research behind sauna. There's a lot of research behind cold water immersion. And I do those regularly, and it's made a big difference, not only in my mental health, my recovery, but from the concept of cold plunging, like doing hard things, if you do the hardest thing to start the day, the rest of the day ends up being easier,
So you do cold plunge and you do the sauna, but do you do like the panels, the infrared panels, and then you do light therapy as well, apart from that?
The light therapy, it emits a little bit of heat, not necessarily the capacity like you're sitting in a sauna, but I've seen a significant improvement in mood. There's a colleague that I have that did a study, a self-study of looking at his hormone function, actually increased his testosterone significantly just by implementing red light therapy on a daily basis. So standing in front of the red light naked for 10 to 12 minutes a day, make sure your entire body is getting hit with that red light. And that just is in the concept of really stimulating mitochondria, which is generating ATP, the fuel, the gasoline for every cell. And so if you're increasing the fuel that your body is generating, downstream, there's going to be a significant impact.
It's interesting. Testosterone levels, they have been in a decline for decades, and it's actually for many it's an issue. How do you approach that subject with your clients? How do you measure testosterone levels? What is a decent level of testosterone? What do you do when you realize that they are too low?
The hard thing about, and I don't know what the reference ranges are in Europe, in America,
between 30 and 60 are like normal levels in Europe,
which is pretty close to what it is in America. The problem is, if you look at what normal reference ranges were even probably 2 decades ago, total testosterone normal was 800 to 1200. Well, every generation testosterone is getting lower and lower and lower. And so instead of looking into root cause, why is testosterone going lower, they just move the goalpost. And so now the reference range for total testosterone is like 200 to 1,000. So you could have a 30-year-old male with a testosterone of 250 still being in the normal range, but 50 years ago, that would have been considered significantly low.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of factors that influence why hormones are getting more and more problematic now. And one of that obviously is body fat, increasing body fat. There's a significant amount of people that are overweight or obese. The enzyme that converts testosterone into estrogen is in body fat. So the more body fat you have, realistically, the lower your testosterone is going to be, because you can have more conversion into estrogen. And so for me, when I'm working with men and to optimize hormones, nutrition, strength training, and sleep and stress are kind of like the 4 pillars that we aim to work on. So optimizing energy intake, optimizing protein. Protein obviously is going to influence lean muscle mass. Increasing lean muscle mass, which is ultimately going to influence body composition, decreasing body fat, therefore keeping testosterone elevated. Also, there's a lot of really good research on strength training and growth hormone and testosterone. Sleep is a big one. We kind of live in a culture of I'll sleep when I die. Grind, and people end up burning themselves out because they're sleeping 4 hours a night, or they're like taking naps or whatever it ends up being, which is ultimately very stressful on the body. And then the more stress that you have on your body, your hormones are not going to be optimal. And so getting you out of this state of constant stress into this state of actually nourishing your body, movement, and then sleeping well and having really good managed stress makes a big difference on your testosterone. So if you're not doing those basic foundational things, anything above and beyond that, the latest supplement, whatever it ends up being, realistically is probably not going to have that big of an impact. That's why it's so important to have those foundations set before you start to supplement.
You also mentioned sunlight, right? Sunlight is important for testosterone.
I mean, sunlight synthesizes into vitamin D, which is a steroid hormone, which is a precursor to all of your sex hormones. And so increasing sun exposure is going to increase steroid hormone production, which downstream, testosterone is a steroid hormone. And so increase in that is likely going to be evident.
Which also makes animal fats important.
Yep, getting good, healthy dietary cholesterol is a building block for hormones. And so making sure you are, if we didn't eat cholesterol, we would be a puddle. We have cholesterol in every single cell. And I think cholesterol has been demonized as this cardiovascular risk where, yes, if you have extremely high cortisol or cholesterol in conjunction with elevated blood sugars, elevated triglycerides, excess body fat, yeah, you're creating a perfect storm. But if your triglycerides are good, your HDL is good, and you may have a little bit extra LDL. Also, dietary cholesterol does not lead to blood cholesterol. That's been well researched. We know that.
Yeah.
So having good quality cholesterol is an essential function of the immune system. To us as humans, we literally would not exist if we didn't have cholesterol in our body.
Yeah. What are some signs of low testosterone?
I think a lot of times people think of testosterone as, people just want to have sex all the time. It just increases libido, which it does increase libido, but also focus, energy, drive. Like if you just wake up and you just don't have that get up and go, you just want to sit on the couch and kind of be a bump on the log.
Yeah.
Your testosterone is likely low. So I've seen people that have had low testosterone that have gone through hormone replacement therapy within a matter of a couple of weeks, like the drive come back, they are motivated, their focus is significantly improved. And obviously it's influencing body composition, I think, for the good. Muscle mass is one of the most anti-aging things that we can do. So optimizing your hormones, getting better muscle mass, getting better body composition, ultimately is going to slow that aging process.
Yeah.
And testosterone is important for women too. It's not just a male hormone, it's a female hormone. Women need testosterone. Sometimes women need to be on exogenous testosterone if they're super, super low.
Yeah.
It is essential for both men and women.
Joshua, what are the difference between biological aging and metabolic aging?
Biological aging, I talk about this a lot.
Yeah.
Biological aging, we have no influence on. It's basically, as long as we're alive on this earth, our biological clock is going to continue to tick. Versus metabolic aging, we do have a significant influence on based on our lifestyle, based on our habits, based on our nutrition. And so if you imagine a 60-year-old male who is eating really, really poorly, they aren't physically active, they're not sleeping well, their biological age is 60 years old. They have no influence on that. Versus, that same individual, because their habits are poor, they're not eating well, they may be aging at a much faster rate than their biological age. So that 60-year-old individual could have a metabolic age of 75. And so aging is really the concept where your cells are dying faster than you're generating new cells. And so to reverse that, let's say you have a different 60-year-old individual who's eating really well, who's strength training, who's doing cardiovascular exercise, who's sleeping, who's taking supplements, who's doing all of the things. They may have a metabolic age of someone, let's say 40. And so now you get a situation where you have two people that are 60 years old. One of them can hardly move. They are on 8 different medications. They are not thriving. Versus you have the other person who's 60 with a metabolic age of 40, who's running a half marathon, who's playing with their grandkids, who's eating really well, who's thriving. Like that's a significant difference. So they're same age, just their lifestyle is resulting in 2 completely different outcomes.
Yeah.
And so the person with a lower metabolic age may get into their 90s and continue to thrive. Versus the other individual may die at 65 because they're so unhealthy.
You mentioned supplements. What is your opinion on supplements? Do you have any favorite ones? Are there supplements that we should stay away from?
Supplements are, 1, a person-by-person basis. 2, I think that they can be really helpful for a time. I don't think that we need to be on supplements, especially a huge dump truck of supplements every day for the rest of your life. As a dietitian, I really want to emphasize food as the primary driver of nutrition, which is why I'm such a big advocate for grass-fed beef, why I'm an advocate for consuming organ meats, why I'm an advocate for pasture-raised eggs and wild-caught fish, because these foods are so nutrient-dense and the bioavailability of these nutrients is significantly higher. Like compare the iron in beef versus the iron in spinach. They both contain iron, but the iron in beef is significantly more bioavailable because of the form that it's in versus in spinach where it's significantly lower. And so my objective on that 90% healthy whole foods basis is I'm going to try to get as much micronutrient density in that 90% as I can, leaving margin for recreational foods, leaving margin for fun foods, knowing that those are probably going to be more calorie dense, less nutrient dense, which is fine. That's what works for me. But in terms of supplementation, the other caveat with that is because of the agricultural processes and practices that have been going on in America specifically, I'll speak to America, the micronutrients in the soil are not where they used to be. And so you could be eating 100% healthy whole food diet now compared to that same diet 100 years ago, and you're just not getting the same nutrition.
No.
And so because of that, either you have to increase the volume of your food or you need to add very targeted supplements in.
Yeah.
So some supplements that I take regularly, I take mitochondria support, I take omega-3s just to continue to get those really good DHA and EPA fatty acids. I do take some testosterone support supplements. I don't take any exogenous testosterone or creams or hormones or anything like that. I take supplements to boost body production.
Yeah.
Yep. And then I also take brain support. I think that is really important. And then just because we're exposed to so many toxins, I do work on liver detox and liver drainage. So support the liver regularly, making sure that is flushing things out that it's getting exposed to, because regardless of how clean you live your life, we're still exposed to toxins, we're still exposed to heavy metals, we're still exposed to fragrances.
That's impossible to avoid in today's society. And since you eat a lot of grass-fed beef, you don't need creatine, for example.
I actually do supplement with creatine. I take it both from a strength and athletic performance perspective, but I also take it from a mental health perspective. Creatine is really, really good for the brain. And I've noticed in seasons where I was not taking creatine consistently and then started taking it again, within a week, my mindset, my mood, my motivation was so much better.
Really?
And then I realized that, wow, the only thing that I was doing differently was the creatine. And so for me, I've seen such a big improvement in brain health taking creatine that I'm like, man, this is something that I need to keep in my regimen. It's one of the most well-researched sports nutrition supplements out there. And so there's a lot of evidence that it's really effective for lean muscle mass and strength and performance.
Yeah.
But from a brain perspective, I'm sold.
What should people look out for when choosing supplements? I mean, reading the labels, what is good quality versus not so good quality?
I mean, making sure that you're getting from a reputable source. I think in the modern era, in the convenience era of Amazon, I think a lot of people just turn to Amazon to buy supplements when you don't know if that supplement is truly that supplement. I've heard so many horror stories of people purchasing supplements on Amazon and the seal is broken, only to find out it's glucose-like tablets or whatnot. And so I recommend all of our patients go through. We have a supplement dispensary called Full Script here in America. I don't know if that's a European thing.
No.
But healthcare practitioners have access to Full Script. And so all of our clients or anybody in our network can go through. It's a network of brands that are pharmaceutical grade or therapeutic quality. And so those are all tested and verified versus like just going to a sports nutrition store right down the street or to a grocery store and picking up some supplements, which the brand may be recognizable, but it could just be massively produced, could be very synthetic versus getting things in like its truest form.
Yeah. What about salt? I mean, sodium has got a really bad reputation. Can you guide us through the types of salt and how they can make a difference?
I see it all the time that salt got blamed for sugar's problem. I think people demonize salt. Salt is an essential mineral. It's an essential nutrient. Not only do we get sodium from it, but especially if you're using a really good quality like mine salt or like a sea salt, you're getting a lot of trace minerals, all things that are used as cofactors for chemical reactions in the body. And so whenever I'm looking at salt, I'm looking at the salt that I use is from an old side mine in Utah here in the United States. And so that compared to, I used to be all on board with sea salts, like a Celtic sea salt or even like a Himalayan sea salt. The problem now, and this is just the world of the toxicity that we live in, the ocean is not.
The microplastics.
Yes, there's microplastics in sea salt. And so for me, to avoid as much exposure to plastics as possible, I want to get salt from a salt mine that is inland, that is not exposed to all those crazy microplastics. Now, am I controlling for heavy metals that are likely in the salt? Yeah, go through a company that is reputable, that they're testing the quality and how much heavy metals. In reality, very small heavy metal exposure. Realistically, like our bodies can still use them, but also the liver is really supposed to be flushing those out. And so if you're trying to completely omit heavy metals entirely, it's probably going to be impossible. It's better to just support your body's natural detox processes. But I think salt is critical. I always recommend my clients salt food heavily, salt food to taste. You actually have more detrimental impact under consuming salt than you do, in my opinion, over consuming salt. There's athletes that are consuming 8 to 10 grams of salt a day and operating well, versus the other side. In America, the minimum or the recommendation is 2,300 milligrams of salt a day, which is quite low. The average American is consuming 3,500 to 4,500 milligrams a day. When you go below 2,300 milligrams a day, you start to get fluid imbalances, you start to get different cardiac things. Moral of the story, we need salt. Salt food to taste, use your own salt. When you're using healthy whole foods, you need to add salt in, versus like highly processed foods where they're adding the salt in. And then if you salt it on top of that, you end up getting more salt. But I think salt is really, really helpful for like a pre-workout, doing like a little pinch of salt. It's a vasodilator. And so it expands your blood vessels, increases blood flow, also replenishes electrolytes lost in sweat.
That's important. You were talking about grass-fed, animal foods in general. What essential nutrients do you find are often lacking in the plant-based diets?
Yeah, well, we've talked about a couple. Cholesterol is a big one.
Yeah.
Creatine is another big one. Vitamin B12, you only get from animal-based foods.
Right.
Taurine, carnitine, carnosine, some of these essential fatty acids. Granted, you can get like omega-3s from algae and different plant-based sources. But those other nutrients that I mentioned only come from animal-based foods. And these are all nutrients that we need, like carnitine, essential for fat metabolism in the mitochondria. And so if we're not getting enough carnitine, then fat metabolism and generating that cellular energy is not going to be as optimal. And all of those, taurine, creatine, cholesterol, all have a very important impact on hormones.
Totally. Yeah. Even heme iron, right? Heme iron is also very important.
Exactly. Like I said, the difference between iron and beef versus spinach, heme iron versus non-heme iron.
Right.
Definitely getting a better bioavailability of those nutrients in animal-based foods.
We already talked about supplementing. So people that follow a plant-based diet, they usually in defense say this, they can say that, yeah, but I'm supplementing what I can't get from the plant-based diet. So is that something that you would recommend, or is there an issue with doing this?
People are going to do what ultimately they think is best for them. I personally do not work with plant-based dieters just because I do not see the same health outcomes that I see with really good quality animal-based proteins. And that's my own. There's dietitians that work with vegans. There's dietitians that work with vegetarians. That's just not my conviction. And so logically, if you have to supplement in order to make your diet complete, your diet is not complete.
Totally.
So you probably shouldn't be doing something that is not complete. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
So eating a really rich whole foods-based diet, getting good quality animal-based proteins, I think is the best strategy for optimal health and longevity.
Based on your experience, what advice would you give to someone that's considering moving away from a vegan diet for health reasons?
I start slow. Don't go from being a vegan to all of a sudden going and ordering a steak. Maybe it looks like you're adding fish. That's usually an easy stepping stone for some people. It also depends on why people were vegan in the first place. A lot of times there's a ethical component of, I don't want to eat a life, which is usually a harder barrier to overcome than I want to do a healthier diet. Well, if it's a healthier diet, let me just help you get educated on the health of animal-based proteins. And so once you get people buy in there, that's a little bit easier for them to reintroduce fish or even eggs, maybe even a little bit of dairy, and then adding in chicken and poultry, and then ultimately getting to red meat, versus people that have the ethical aspect of not eating animals. Sometimes people just don't want to relate to eating a land animal. And so them eating fish, it's a little bit more sight unseen. It's in the ocean. I don't see it. It just ends up on my plate. Sometimes that can be an easier stepping stone than like driving past a pasture and seeing cows and then correlating that to a steak. And so I would say just start slow. Try to get protein in a couple of days a week. It's not something, if you're a vegan and you want to start integrating more animal-based proteins, it's not something you need to eat every single day. Start with one egg. Start with one bite of something. See how your body responds. If you notice that you're actually feeling better, continue to increase your portion size, increase your frequency, ultimately getting to a point where daily you're having a variety of animal-based proteins, Maybe you have chicken one meal, maybe you have beef one meal, maybe you have fish one meal, or you have some sort of variety versus every single day, every meal is chicken.
Before you mentioned the acne that you had when you were younger, could you explain the traditional Western approach to treating acne and skin issues, and why do you believe it might be ineffective for some people?
The Western approach, unfortunately, is jumping right to some sort of medication, whether for women it's birth control to control hormones, whether it's Accutane or spironolactone, these medications that just given out to topically address the issue rather than actually going into the root cause. Oftentimes it's inflammatory food causing leaky gut, causing some sort of systemic inflammation. It could be bacteria in the gut, it could be fungus in the gut, it could be mold exposure. Your skin is a reflection of what your inputs are. So if you imagine your skin being your outputs, in order to change your outputs, you have to change your inputs. And so the Western approach is really just like bypass, hey, what are you eating? How much sugar are you consuming? How much physical activity are you doing? Are you washing your face? Do you have good like skincare? I mean, acne could be on your back, it could be on your chest, it could be anywhere. What are you doing from a hygiene perspective to address the surface? Meanwhile, what are you doing from a hygiene perspective to adjust and address the interior? You know?
Yeah.
We just had this, my wife just went through a dermatology appointment a couple days ago for an annual skin check. And because she's pregnant with a little baby boy, she has a little bit of acne. Like she's in the 3rd trimester, like that's normal. And the person's first reaction was, oh, you got a little bit of acne there. Have you considered this? And it was a medication versus using logical reasoning. Oh, she's pregnant. Like she's in her 3rd trimester. Hormones are changing. And also, are we going to talk about your diet? Are we going to talk about your lifestyle? Are we going to talk about stress? All these other things. It was like, oh, you have a little bit of acne. Have you considered this?
Your first child?
First child.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
How do you approach your clients that blame their health conditions only to genetic predispositions? How can you guide them?
I think genetics is obviously a big component to who we are as humans. I mean, it's what literally makes us. The easiest example that I say is genetics is the loaded gun.
Yeah.
Your epigenetics, your lifestyle, your diet, your activity is whether you pull the trigger or not. And so you could have a genetic predisposition for, let's say, diabetes. You can influence whether you get diabetes, type 2 diabetes. Type 1 is autoimmune. You can influence whether you get type 2 diabetes based on your diet, based on your lifestyle, based on your physical activity. And so, yeah, you may have a lineage of 4 generations above you having diabetes, but that doesn't mean you as an individual need to get diabetes. You could completely rewrite the script, eat well, move well, sleep well, like have all these good components of health and not get diabetes.
Yeah.
So epigenetics, which is a newer, I say newer science. Genetics, obviously we've been studying genetics for a very long time. Epigenetics is much newer. And basically that just means these tags on the genome that it's a switch, turn the gene on or turn the gene off.
Yeah.
And so your lifestyle factors influence whether that gene gets turned on or it gets turned off.
When it comes to thyroid issues, how important is stress and stress management? Do you have any strategies for effective stress management for your clients?
Stress is huge, not just on thyroid, but on everything. Stress, it's not the immediate stress, like someone jumps out and scares you and you have this big immediate response. It's the low grade stress that happens chronically that really ends up being a big deal. Not getting enough sleep, not eating well, inflammation in the body, blood sugar dysregulation. All of these things are stressors on the body, which ultimately signal to the brain that there's stress. The brain, the hypothalamus tell the pituitary. The pituitary is then going to signal the thyroid to release hormone, or it signals the adrenals to release hormone. And so when you get this feedback loop that there's this constant stress, your pituitary is constantly telling the adrenal glands that there's stress there and we need to react to it. And so the thyroid is definitely impacted by stress. And I have seen in many of my thyroid clients that stress is the driver of why the thyroid is thrown off. And so I would say that most of the people that I encounter are stuck in a fight or flight state. And that's just from life, the grind of life, stressors of life, poor management of stress over long periods of time, just constantly in a fight or flight state. And so we have to use different techniques and strategies to almost like forcibly put these people into a parasympathetic nervous state. A couple modalities that I use, I like sauna. We mentioned that. I like breath work. I think that there's a lot of value in breath work, and it's something so tangible that anybody can do. Just do some box breathing for a couple minutes and you can actually bring yourself down out of a stressful situation. Utilization of essential oils, whether that's topically, whether that's aromatically, can be really effective on the stress response and just bringing like a calmness. And so objectively, if you have someone that is just chronically stressed and they're trying to go through a healing protocol, unless you address the stress, their bodies are likely not going to fully advance forward in that healing because their body is just wound up tight.
So looking into the future, how do you see the field of functional medicine and its approach to thyroid disorders evolving?
There's definitely been an increase in popularity and interest in functional medicine, I would say, especially after 2020 and 2021, and just the distrust in the medical system. People are leaning towards, okay, let's actually figure out the root cause and let's dive into the root. That way symptom reduction can be a thing. And so I think functional medicine is really the driver of health. It's not disease management, it's really health promotion. How can we promote your health, understand root cause, and go to that root cause and heal and support the root cause rather than addressing all of these like extracurricular symptoms. And so in the world of root cause and thyroid, one thing that I see all the time is some sort of liver stagnation. The liver's just overwhelmed from environmental toxins. I think we typically see thyroid disease more in women. My hypothesis is women wear more cosmetics, they wear more fragrances. And so because of that, those constant exposures of those endocrine disruptors end up basically blocking hormones in the body. And so as we eliminate these toxins and we actually nourish the body back to optimal function, what the body's intended purpose was, we naturally see a reboot and an improvement in thyroid function. Other root cause is gut infections. I think that it's about 50% of people with hypothyroid or Hashimoto's have some sort of degree of dysbiosis, whether it's SIBO or SIFO. And so these gut infections where thyroid hormone is converted from inactive to active thyroid hormone in the gut, in the liver. So if the liver is stagnant and overwhelmed, if the gut has dysbiosis and it's inflamed, naturally you can understand that you are not going to convert inactive to active hormone, which means that feedback loop back to the brain, back to the pituitary, back to the thyroid, in some capacity is going to be off. And so with thyroid disease impacts so many people, many of which don't actually know that they have thyroid disease. May not actually be a thyroid issue. It could be that their gut is inflamed, that they have SIBO. It could be that they're just constantly stressed. It could be that their bodies are just overwhelmed. And so the thyroid ends up being the alarm that, hey, something is going wrong, but something has been going on much longer than what you're seeing in the thyroid.
It's been a pleasure talking to you, Joshua. We're running out of time. Is there anything that you think that I might have missed, something that you wanted to talk about?
I don't think anything we missed. I think we covered a lot of really good topics. This was a lot of fun.
We did. Great. So where can people find you?
Best place would be on Instagram. My wife and I co-manage the Kreifels.
Yeah, your Instagram is great.
Thank you. And then our business is Kreifwell, which is a play on Kreifels Wellness. So Kreifwell is our functional medicine platform, but through Instagram, the Kreifels would be the best place.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure. It's been super interesting.
Thank you so much. This was a pleasure.
And we'll stay in touch. Thank you so much for listening to the Hunger for Change podcast. I hope you enjoyed the episode. I also wanted to take a moment to talk about Naturally, my brand of healthy food products. At Naturally, we are on a mission to change the world through what we eat. This is why we worked so hard to make products that are delicious and also good for you. They're all gluten-free, have no refined sugars, no sweeteners, and no additives. At the moment, Naturally is only available in Europe. However, we're working to expand to other continents, so stay tuned. If you're in Spain, you can head over to our website, naturally.com, and it will take you to our online store. And if you're in Italy, Portugal, Germany, Poland, France, the Netherlands, or in Sweden, you can find them on Amazon. I will leave you all these links in the description anyway, so that you can find them. Thank you so much for listening, and stay tuned for the next episode.